Hi there, welcome to Market Intel, the show that brings you what's happening in the front row with those working with SME businesses. Today we have Michelle Sharp. Now, I can't really give you a title. You do have a day job, but you also do about 100 different things all at once. So probably the busiest person I've ever met. So who are you? What do you do?
Lovely to be here today, by the way. Thank you very much. So Michelle Sharp, I'll start with my day job because that's the one that pays the bills, so really important. I'm recently, probably 8 months ago or so, joined Vodafone New Zealand, and I have a dual role. So from a leadership perspective, head of South Island, and very excited also to be head of Internet of Things across the country, which is great. So that's a day job. I then do a few other bits and pieces too. So I'm a trustee of the High Tech Trust. I'm an independent chair for the Bank of New Zealand, which is a really, really great role, which I really enjoy. Helping out the council at the moment as well, with as an external advisor around their IT bits and pieces, and again, really different, to do something a bit in politics. And then I hold a couple of roles that I brought over from my previous world, which is I'm now director of Kilmarnock Enterprises and a trustee of Akina Foundation.
There we go, because you used to, when you were the CEO of Kilmarnock, they sort of dubbed you the Queen of Social Enterprise. Yes. So are you thinking you're getting the new title, the Queen of Tech?
I don't know about that. I think there are probably a lot more people much better qualified. I mean, I guess social enterprise, because of the way that we turned Kilmarnock around, it was a new buzzword, and Kilmarnock became like the poster kid for New Zealand of social enterprise at one stage. But yeah, certainly trying to make my mark on the tech sector too, that's for sure.
So Internet of Things, IoT, it's been around for a wee while now.
Yes.
But there's probably, particularly in the small business space, there's probably a lot of businesses that don't really understand or even heard of it, but potentially it's got the opportunity to really disrupt the way we do business and actually add a lot of value, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. It's not a new thing. So we've had machine to machine, you might have heard that, for many, many years. In fact, I started my very first gig at Vodafone way back when I was much, much younger in the UK on an X25 packet network, which was really machine to machine. What the Internet of Things is it probably a new terminology to explain what it is. It's basically giving something that doesn't have connectivity an ability to transmit data, and the beauty comes of what you do with that data. So incredibly powerful for business, actually. So you can imagine if you're a small farmer running a farm and you want to try and make better decisions around when to irrigate, for example, rather than going and looking outside and wondering what the weather's doing, you can actually start using data and the accumulation of that data to start making really smart decisions. So I am a firm believer that Internet of Things, or IoT as it's abbreviated, is going to be a game changer for every business, but for the SME sector in particular, with some really clever choices of how to make good decisions with that data. It could be, life-changing.
So have you got any sort of examples of any SMEs at the moment that have embraced, I think it was Vodafone did that advert a couple of years ago, and it was the guy with the mechanics workshop, and he was connectivity, and they had he was using it all on his iPad and stuff. Is that the kind of that what you're sort of talking
yes,
about?
Absolutely. I mean, basically there are a number of sectors which are ripe for IoT. So I've talked about the farmer. So clearly agriculture is a huge sector, and you can from sort of a smart fencing to anything you can imagine there, and that certainly in the context of New Zealand is a sector that will really thrive on that. But you look at manufacturing as well. You imagine if you have a production line, having sensors along the production line that help you actually make decisions as to where there might be areas that you need to speed things up or slow things down, or where you should put people, and all of that available on a device or on an iPad. The one that we're doubling down on and going really hard with, which is going to be very, very applicable to the SME sector, is asset management. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine whether you are a small organisation or a massive organisation like Foodstuffs, to know where your assets are, to track them and to manage them all on a device that you can pick up and look at here. Again, it's a game changer. To start making decisions on logistics. I mean, we've all heard around, clearly for a number of years now, you've got vehicles that have tracking in there and the decisions that are made around where a vehicle is and all of that. But this becomes something that is very accessible now for the SME sector. So if I'm allowed to talk about it very, very briefly, we're very excited about the fact that Vodafone will be able to go to market very, very soon with a number of asset management devices, which are going to be really appropriate for the SME all the way through to the large corporate.
And you heard it here first.
Yes, indeed. Yes, so I'm really excited about that, and making it very, very simple for an organisation to engage in that type of technology. And that's almost like the stepping stone in. And once you start understanding the power of that data and how you can use that data, I think, as I say, it's a real game changer.
I think I'd say a lot of SMEs in general be more open to the cloud anyway, and connectivity, given obviously what we all kind of went through. So, very quickly, I know even from my own, we had to sort of move the office from town into everyone working from home and using Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and we're doing a lot of that. Everything's in the cloud now, and it's all synced to my phone, and it's something that I think if you haven't been doing before, you just have to now, don't you? Especially.
Absolutely, and it's not just from a new way of working, but it's sort of like that whole sort of business resistance and risk, to minimise the risk of these things. I mean, myself as CEO of Kilmarnock, we just talked about that, which is a SME technically. For us to be able to put everything in the cloud and to start managing things remotely, we accelerated our capabilities in terms of what we can do, and therefore the type of work we could go after, because the leaner team was able to do so much more with our time, just by being really smart about how we use technology. And I think that's a great example of an organisation that really embraced it and used it for its benefit. And it meant that when COVID hit, the team at Kilmarnock, I'm no longer working there, I'm a director now, but the team at Kilmarnock literally were able to mobilise an entire team to going home immediately without any impact. So really good.
So let's dig a little bit into your past and sort of the leadership and the story that you've had, because you've had numerous roles over the years. But from memory, when we caught up a couple of years ago, you were talking about how obviously you're like myself, originally from the UK. You were quite senior, I think, at Vodafone, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a really interesting time. So I started my life, and I keep calling this my claim to fame, and nobody's corrected me, and I think it is right, that I was Vodafone's first ever in history sponsored undergraduate. They put me through university. So I have a long affiliation and a huge passion for the brand. They were wonderful to me as a youngster. And then after a number of years there, learning business and working out what I wanted to do, with their permission, I guess, I ended up leaving Vodafone and working for one of their service providers. And at the time, really similar to what I'm doing with IoT now, a time where everybody was talking about mobile data, but it just kept not happening because people didn't know what they didn't know. They couldn't imagine that you could get emails on the go, all those things. And at the time, in the service provider, I decided to back a horse, and I happened to back the right horse, it seems, which was BlackBerry.
Oh, yes.
And all of a sudden, BlackBerry exploded through the law firms in the UK, and the result of that meant that Vodafone actually ended up buying the service provider back, which elevated me quite young to a senior manager role there. The success of that and what I'd managed to do at Project Telecom meant that I was then shoulder tapped by the person who'd actually sold the organisation to Vodafone and made his money, and said, how about a number of us found, and I was a founding director of an organisation called Tamiko in the UK that grew incredibly fast. In fact, I think it was 5 years in a row that we won the Microsoft Tech Track fastest growing company in the IT sector. And we did that specifically, interesting of this conversation, by providing an incredibly strong service to the SME sector in telecommunications and IT. We realised that many SMEs' needs are as complex as the corporates, but they don't have the capability internally, they don't have the departments to actually deal with them. And often in a telecommunications and IT world, they're kind of lumped in with consumers. So we had this model, which meant that we gave them the same service as you would imagine a corporate having, but very tailored to the SME sector. And it was fantastic to see organisations that we were supporting through technology actually grow and do well. So yeah, so that was that gig, and then came to New Zealand, married a Kiwi, which good thing to do. I recommend it, and came to New Zealand, and that's where I decided to have a bit of a turning point in my life and to give back, and found this little charity in Christchurch called Kilmarnock Enterprises, and started by doing just 20 hours a week part-time business development just to give back a bit, and eventually became CEO. And awesome. That's what I did for 10 years. Yeah.
There we go. So, going back to your sort of, like you say, a young graduate sponsored up, and then obviously through hard work and a little bit of obviously circumstances, obviously found yourself in quite a senior role. How did you adjust? I mean, you're obviously probably thinking back of it now, but how did you adjust? Because obviously that takes a completely different skill set from managing 3 people up to a team of however many it might have been. How did you adapt to that?
I think my style has always been, and remains, I hope, one where I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at, or what I need to learn, maybe. And therefore, just being really open and transparent about who I am and not trying to be something that I'm not. I think that's what I've always done. And therefore, being open to the fact that when I went back into that really senior role, that I was young. And I mean, I was not only young, but I was the only female in that environment as well. So quite an interesting time in my life. At the time, it never bothered me. But looking back, I go, wow, that was something. But I think just by being a genuine leader who was doing it for the right reasons and really cared about my team and used the team around me and the team underneath me to do the best for the company. I think that's how I did it. Yeah.
And that's how you've sort of followed that through now to your, because you say you were obviously you're head of IoT, which is obviously quite a strategic role, but you've still got your everyday job, which is obviously leading the South Island, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's exactly, I mean, you have to ask my colleagues what they think, but I think hopefully what I bring is that element of authenticity and just being a good human with their feet on the ground that knows that I'm good at this particular bit, but actually, Dave, you're really good at that, so let's work together as a team. Very collaborative, yeah. That's it, yeah.
And so we always finish off our interviews talking about what's the one piece of advice. So you've had a whole range of business jobs, and obviously we haven't talked about it on camera, but we have off camera, about how at one point in your career where you had to take a business that was financially not looking too good and you had to turn it around and make sure that it got ahead. So there'll be a lot of businesses like that coming up. From your experience, obviously we were talking about before, you're going, how am I going to pay the wages this week?
Yes.
What's your piece of advice for those business owners at the moment?
A few bits of advice. I think the first thing to understand is, for us certainly, was what do we want to be in, let's say, take a timeline, but 18 months' time. Actually agree it and make sure that you've got a strategy that really is very focused towards leading towards that, so that you hold each other as a team to account to go, okay, that over there is really good fun, that is fantastic, but what's it doing to help us achieve what we've agreed and committed to as a senior team that we're going to land in 18 months' time? And that is what saw us through. It was being very, very clear, very deliberate, very focused, seeking advice, being open as well. I think that's the other thing, is actually listen. I think listen to the advice. There are so many people willing to help, and to have a really strong sense of the role that you play in that market as well. So understand the market, understand the role, understand where you want to get to, remain incredibly strictly focused. Like we ended up printing our our pillars and our achievements, like our statements, on every wall of every room that we would ever meet in, so that we could go and literally, I still do this today, I point at a blank wall to say, what activity, the activity you're doing here, where does that fit into what we've agreed we will achieve? And that makes you really crystal clear. That doesn't mean that from time to time you don't make decisions that are outside of that, but you do it in a very conscious way, rather than just randomly going off and chasing the fun stuff.
And so when you're a small business owner and you might be a one-man band and you don't have that team around you, because obviously there's that ability of having a team propping you up and, like you say, sticking to what you've agreed to and working together, how would you as a one-man band, though, would you surround yourself with advisors or friends and family? What would be your view? It
depends on the circumstance, but I spend a lot of time speaking to a lot of SMEs around how best to get ahead in that regard. I would try and get yourself a team of advisors, and friend and family are great, but actually maybe the objection isn't quite there. If you can get yourself a diverse group of a couple of good people that you really trust as advisors, that's the best way to start. And then clearly you get to the stage where you might want to form a formal board or something like that. But definitely surround yourself by good people that you can trust. It has to start, and that they have the best interests of you and your organisation at heart. That's another thing, not somebody who just wants to put some kind of advisory role on their CV for the sake of it. It has to be the right thing for the business owner and for the organisation.
Awesome. And so, future's bright.
The future's bright, it is indeed. I would say the future's red. Future's bright, yes, absolutely.
Awesome, thanks Michelle, great to catch up.
Yeah, cheers. You too, cheers, thanks.